Hello and welcome to the course. I hope that this will be your right course and you will enjoy the projects that we will be building throughout this course. So, as you already know, we're going to create more than 30 different modern and creative web projects. All those projects will be built based on three core technologies of front-end web development, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I would like to mention one thing. As I said, the projects will be created based on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so you should have a basic understanding of those technologies in order to follow the lectures and not to get confused. The projects will be full of different modern techniques and tricks. You will be able to learn about how to create nice and beautiful effects and animations, which then you can use as the inspiration to develop and customize your own portfolio. As I mentioned, we will be building more than 30 projects. They are independent templates, so you don't have to go through them in order. You can build any of the projects you want from the list. It's absolutely up to you. Some of the projects are simple ones, but also you will meet some advanced projects as well, so we included all the levels that the developer needs. Throughout the course, we will build projects like navigations, slideshows, custom checkboxes, 3D cards, and other interesting and creative projects, so I'm sure you will enjoy them. I think you will get a huge practice and experience in front-end web development, in which HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are a must. Alright, so let's move on and get started. Hello and welcome to the course. We are glad that you are here and we hope that you will enjoy the course. Before we dive deeper and start to create our projects, first of all, we have to prepare our working environment. I'm sure that most of you are already prepared to write the code. If so, then you can feel free, skip this video and jump into the projects right away. But if not, then that's not the problem. Let's go ahead and set up some tools. Throughout this course, we will need two main tools, which are Modern Web Browser and a text editor. As the web browser, I'm going to use mostly Google Chrome, and also in some cases we'll need the help of Mozilla Firefox as well. I'm sure that you already know how to install these web browsers, and I think you already have them, but anyway, let's see how to download them. In order to get the Google Chrome, we have to go to this URL here and download the web browser. The installation process is quite simple, so I'm not going to go through it. As for the Mozilla Firefox, you have to use this URL and download the web browser from here. Both links will be attached to this lecture. Alright, let's move on and talk about the text editor. We're going to use Visual Studio Code because right now it's one of the best text editors in the world. Of course, you can feel free and use your favorite text editor, it's up to you, but I recommend to use the VS Code. In order to download the VS Code, you have to visit this website and get the text editor either for Windows or Mac or Linux. This link will be attached to this lecture as well. The installation process of the Visual Studio Code is very simple too, so I'm sure that you won't have any trouble with it. Alright, so once you install both tools, then you will be good to go. So let's jump right into the projects. Alright, so it's time to create a new project. In this project, we're going to be creating a 3D sign-in and sign-up forms. And the project is going to be created based on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In this video, I'm going to go through the project and describe it. So, as you can see, we have here a sign-in form displayed by default with a full screen background image. At the top left corner of the form, we have the button, which is displaying the text, sign up. If I click it, then the form will rotate in a 3D environment, and the sign-up form will be displayed. If I click the sign-in button, we will get back the sign-in form here. So you can switch forms with those buttons in 3D space. Okay, so that's it about this project. I hope it will be interesting and you will enjoy it, so let's get started. Alright, so we are ready to start to build the project. I have created a new folder on the desktop called 3D Forms, in which I have another folder called Images. It includes the background image. Let's go ahead and open this folder in VS Code and then create our working files for HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I'm going to call the files index.html, then style.css and script.js. Then open the index.html file and create a basic HTML document. For that I'm going to use emmet. We have to place an exclamation mark and then press tab or enter. So here we have the basic HTML tags. First of all, let's change the title. I'm going to call it 3D forms. And then I'm going to link the CSS and JavaScript files. Let's open the link tag and specify here in the hReference attribute the path of the file. As for the JavaScript file, I'm going to open script tag right above the closing body tag, and then we need to specify the name of the file in the source attribute. Alright, lastly, I'm going to run the project to the browser using one of the VS Code packages called Live Server. It allows us to run the project live and make the updates and changes without refreshing the page each time. Before we start to write the code, I'm going to place the editor and the browser side by side. Alright, let's go ahead and start to create the HTML markup. I'm going to open a div tag, which is going to be the container. Next, we need another div tag. It will wrap both forms, so I'm going to assign to it class forms wrapper. This element will consist of two different elements. Two different form elements. The first one is going to be sign in form. So let's open the form tag with the class sign in form. So each form element will include a button, heading, and the inputs. Let's open the link tag. It's going to be the button. Let's assign to it class signup_btn. I used here sign up because this button will help us to navigate to the sign up form. Alright, next we need heading. Let's open h2 heading tag with the content sign in. After that, I'm going to insert here input elements. Let's open the div tag, which will be the wrapper. Let's assign to it class input wrapper. So overall, we will have three different input elements for email, password, and submit button. Let's open input tag with the type text and with placeholder attribute your email. Then I'm going to duplicate this line of code. This input field will be for the password, so let's change the type attribute, make it password, and also change the value of the placeholder attribute. We need again password. The next input element will be for the submit button, so the type is going to be submit. We don't need here placeholder attribute. Instead of that, we need value sign in. Okay, and that's it about the first form element. Let's go ahead and duplicate the entire form and then make some changes. We need here the class name, sign up form. Then the button is going to be sign in. Also, let's change the content of the heading. We need sign up. In the case of the sign up form, we will have 5 different inputs. The first one is going to be for the name. So we need here your name. And also we will have one input for password confirmation. Let's change here the placeholder, insert here confirm password. And lastly, let's change the value of the submit button, use here sign up. Alright, that's it regarding HTML markup. Now it's time to customize the project. Let's open the CSS file and first of all create some default and reset styles. I'm going to select every element using an asterisk. First of all, I'm going to get rid of default margin and padding. Let's go ahead and set both properties to 0. Then I'm going to make box sizing, border box. Also, I'm going to get rid of default underline from the link elements. Let's set text decoration none. And then change the font family. I'm going to use here font called Arial with the font group sans serif. Throughout this project, we're going to use rem as the measurement unit. Right now, 1 rem equals 16 pixels because the font size of the HTML element is equal to 16 pixels. I'm going to convert 1 rem to 10 pixels, and for that we have to decrease the font size of the HTML element. Let's make it 62.5%. Alright, so the elements became smaller. Next I'm going to take care of the container. Let's select it and define its width and height. I'm going to set width to 100%. As for the height, I'm going to make it 100% of the viewport. Therefore, we need here 100 VH. Then I'm going to set the image as the full screen background. Before that, I'm going to use linear gradient function because I want to make the background image a little bit darker. Let's use here RGBA value 31.7.7 and the opacity 0.7. As for the second RGBA value, it's going to be the black color with the opacity 0.7. Next, I'm going to specify the URL of the image. We have the folder called images, in which we store image called bg.png. The position is going to be center, and also we need no repeat. Finally, I'm going to set the background size to cover. Alright, so here we have the full screen background image, and actually that's it regarding the container. Now we have to start to customize the forms. I think it would be better if we hide one of the forms for a while and style just one form. So let's go ahead and hide the second sign up form. Then select Forms Wrapper. I'm going to center the wrapper on the page. So let's set its position to absolute. Then we have to define top and left properties. Let's make both of them 50%. And then in order to center the element perfectly on the page, we have to use transform translate. We have to move elements by -50% on both directions, I mean X and Y axis. So as you can see, the form is placed in the center of the page. Next, I'm going to customize the form itself. So let's select Forms Wrapper, followed by the tag name form. First of all, let's define width and height. I'm going to set width to 50 rem. The height is going to be 35 rem. And also change the background color. I'm going to use here RGBA value 41.14.108, and then the opacity 0.925. Alright, next I'm going to align the elements inside of the form using Flexbox. We need display flex. Then we have to change the direction because we need to place the elements vertically, so we need flex direction to be column. Then in order to create some space around the elements, we need justify content space around. And also in order to center the elements horizontally, we need align items center. Lastly, let's create a little shadow effect. I'm going to create shadow on all 4 sides. So I'm going to use the following values. We need 0.1 rem 3 times. Then the color CCC. And also I'm going to use here value called inset. It allows us to create the shadow inside of the element. Next we need -0.1 rem twice. Then 0.1 rem with the same color CCC and with the same value inset. Alright, that's it regarding form element for now. Next I'm going to style the individual elements. Let's start with the sign up button. I'm going to select it using tag names form and A. Let's define its position as absolute. And then set top and left properties, both of them to 2 rem. So as you can see, the button is positioned correctly. Let's go ahead and style it. First of all, I'm going to change the background color. Let's make it white. Also, I'm going to make the text bolder using font weight with the value 600. Then let's transform text into uppercase. Also, I'm going to change the color. Let's use RGBA value 40, 114, 108. And also create some space between the letters. Make it 0.2 rem. Alright, after that I'm going to create some space inside of the button using padding. Let's set padding to 0.5 rem at the top, then 1 rem on the right side, 0.5 rem at the bottom, and 3 rem on the left side. And finally, we need to change the shape of the button using border radius. It will take 4 different values. The border radius at the top left corner is going to be 100%. Then we will have 0.5 rem at the top right corner. Bottom right corner is going to be 0.5 rem. As for the bottom left corner, it's going to be 100%. Okay, that's it about the button. Let's move on and customize the heading. Select Form H2. First of all, let's set the font size, make it 2.3 rem. Make the text uppercase. Also create some space between the letters, make it 0.2 rem, and then change the color, make it white. Okay, so the heading is customized, and now we have to take care of the inputs. Let's go ahead and select Input Wrapper. We need to place the inputs vertically on top of each other, so we need to use Display Flex and Flex Direction column. Next, I'm going to select the input itself. Let's define width and height. I'm going to set width to 25 rem. As for the height, it's going to be 3 rem. After that, I'm going to create some space inside and also outside of the inputs. Let's use padding with the values 0.5 rem at the top and bottom and 1 rem on the left and right sides. As for the margin, it's going to be 0.5 rem at the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right sides. Next, let's change the background color. I'm going to make it transparent. Also, let's create border with the values 0.1 rem, solid, and the color white. And also make the inputs rounded using border radius with the value 5 rem. Okay, so the inputs already look good, but we need to add a couple of more styles to them. Let's change the color, make it white. Also create some space between the letters, make it 0.1 rem. And then get rid of default outline. Set it to none. Alright, so that's it about the inputs. Next, I'm going to change the color of the placeholder. We need to select at first wrapper, followed by the input and the pseudo element placeholder. Let's set color to white and also change the font weight, make it 300. Alright, lastly, I'm going to customize the submit button. Let's select input with type attribute. At first, let's change the background color, make it white. Then the color is going to be RGBA value 40, 114, 108. Let's increase the font weight, make the text bolder, set font weight to 900. Also transform text into uppercase. And finally, change the type of the cursor, make it pointer. Alright, that's it regarding sign-in form. It is customized. Now we have to display the sign-up form and make both forms work. So let's go to the index.html file and display back the second form. As for the first form, I'm going to hide it for a while. So the only thing that we have to do about the sign-up form is to customize the sign-in button. We have to move it to the top right corner of the form, and also we have to change the shape of the button. The direction should be to the right side. Right now we have common styles for both buttons, so I'm going to select both buttons separately and define their individual styles. First of all, I'm going to select sign up btn, Then let's grab left property from the common styles. Also, I'm going to grab padding and the border radius. Then I'm going to duplicate this code. Let's change the class name. We need here sign in btn. Also, we need to change left into right. Then we need different padding. It's going to be 0.5 rem, 3 rem, 0.5 rem, and 1 rem. And also we need different border radius. The values are going to be the following: 0.5 rem, then 100% twice, and again 0.5 rem. Alright, so both forms are customized. Let's go ahead and display both of them. So as you can see, we have here both forms. The position of the button is not correct right now. It's because it is positioned according to the forms wrapper, and we need to position it according to the form element. In order to do that, we have to assign to the form element position absolute. So right now the forms are no longer centered on the page. Let's go ahead and fix that. First of all, I'm going to get rid of transform translate from here. And then we have to adjust the top and left positions. The top position is going to be 50% minus the half of the height of the form. As for the left position, it's going to be 50% minus the half of the width of the form. So we need the following calculations. Let's use calc function. The top position is going to be 50% minus 17.5 rem, because the height is equal to 35 rem. As for the left position, it's going to be 50% minus 25 rem, because the width of the form is 50 rem. Alright, so as you can see, the form elements are centered. Now we have to position forms in the 3D space. I'm going to rotate the sign up form. As I said, we need to position elements in 3D space. In order to create a 3D environment, we have to use one of the CSS properties called perspective, and I'm going to assign it to the container. As the value, let's assign to it 100 rem. The form elements are grandchildren of the container, and in order to apply a 3D environment to the forms, we have to use another property called transform style with the value preserve 3D. And we have to assign it to the parent element of the forms, which is a forms wrapper. Alright, now it is time to rotate the sign up form. I'm going to select it separately and then use transform with the rotate y function, and as the value I'm going to pass here 270 degrees. Okay, so right now the sign up form is not visible because the sign up form is rotated, and in order to see better why it's not visible, I can change the value. Let's set it to 250 degrees. So now you can see that form is rotated. You may think that we could use here just 90 degrees, but in that case the content of the form would be rotated in the opposite direction. So that's why we used here 270 degrees. Alright, next we have to move the sign up form to the left side and also straight deeply in 3D space. In order to move the elements to the left side, I'm going to use translate z function with the value 25 rem. And now we have to move the element according to the x-axis with the value minus 25 rem. Okay, and lastly, let's get back here 270 degrees. The only thing that we have to do before we program the buttons is to rotate the entire forms wrapper slightly. So let's assign to it transform, rotate y with the value minus 10 degrees. Alright, that's it. Now we have to start to write some JavaScript. We have to attach click event listeners to the both buttons. But first of all, I'm going to select both buttons. Let's create a new variable. I'm going to call it sign up btn, and then select the element using query selector method. Let's specify here the class name sign up btn, Then I'm going to duplicate this line of code. Let's change the name of the variable. It's going to be signinBTN. As for the class name, we need signinBTN. Alright, after that, let's attach event listeners to both of them. Let's start with the signUpBTN. Add here event listener method with click event and with the callback function, which will be executed once we click the sign up button. Let's duplicate this code and change signUpBTN into signinBTN. Alright, so once we click the buttons, we have to rotate the forms wrapper. In order to do that, I'm going to add a new class to the forms wrapper. Then we will select forms wrapper with this newly created class in CSS, and we will define the rotation of the element. First of all, I'm going to prevent default actions of the submit buttons. If we don't do that, then the page will scroll up if we have some additional content. So we need to pass here an event object in both cases. And then we need e.preventDefault. Alright, so as we said, we have to add a new class to the forms wrapper. First of all, let's go ahead and select this element, create new variable, call it forms wrapper, and then select the elements using query selector method. We need here class name forms wrapper. Then let's add a new class to this element. We need forms wrapper, followed by the property called class list, which includes all the classes that the element has. Then we need method called add, and we have to specify here the name of the class. Let's say change. Alright, let's go to the CSS file and select forms wrapper with class change. So once we click the button, we have to rotate the forms wrapper. So I'm going to pass here transform rotate Y with the value 100 degrees. So if we click the button, then the form will rotate, but as you can see, it has changed its position. So we need to define the left position. Let's use again calc function. In this case, we need 50% plus the half of the width, 25 rem. Now everything looks fine. We have to make the effect smoother. For that, we have to use transition with the values transform 0.5 second, which is the duration, and then left again with 0.5 second. Now if I click, then the form will rotate smoothly. Right now just the sign up button is working, so let's go ahead and take care of the second button as well. In the case of the second button, we just need to remove the class change from the forms wrapper. So let's go ahead and grab this line of code, paste it down here and change add into remove. So now everything works perfectly, and actually with this project we are done. If you think that the forms are smaller on extra large screen size, then you can simply increase the font size of the HTML element. Let's change it and make it, let's say, 72.5%. So now I think it's better, and actually we are done. We have finished working on this project. Hopefully it was interesting and useful. So let's move on to the next project. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to work on our next project. In this section, we're going to be creating a search bar with some nice animation effects. Let's go ahead and describe the project. As you can see, we have here a search icon at the top right corner of the page. If I click it, then it will start to move and animate. It will move to the top of the page. So the input field will appear with the closing X button. If I click it, the input field will hide and the search icon will go back to its default place. Okay, so that's it about this project. It's going to be a little project, but I hope it will be interesting. I've created a new folder on the desktop called Search Bar, which right now is empty. Let's go ahead and open it in VS Code and create our working files for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'm going to call them index.html, style.css, and script.js. Alright, let's open the index.html file and create a basic HTML document. For that, I'm going to use an exclamation mark. So here we have a basic HTML text. First of all, I'm going to change the title. Let's insert here, search bar. And then I'm going to link CSS and JavaScript files. Let's open link tag and specify here the path of the file. As for the JavaScript file, I'm going to open script tag right above the closing body tag. And then we need script.js in the source attribute. Actually, besides that, I'm going to bring in one more link for font awesome icons. Let's go ahead and search for font awesome CDN.js. Then let's copy the first link. Then we need to open link tag and paste the link in the href attribute. Okay, so everything is ready. Lastly, I'm going to run the project to the browser using a live server. This VS Code package allows us to run the project live to the browser, and you can make changes and updates without refreshing the page each time. Before we start to write the code, I'm going to organize our working environments. Let's place the editor and the browser side by side. Alright, so finally we can start to write the code. First of all, I'm going to create HTML markup. Let's open div tag with the class search input wrapper. It will include search input field. So let's open another div tag with the class search input. I'm going to pass here two different elements. The first one is going to be the input with the type text and with the placeholder attribute with value search. As for the second element, it's going to be closing X button. I'm going to use here font awesome icon. Let's open I element and assign to it classes FAS, FA times. Alright, after that we need to create a search icon. So let's open div tag with the class search icon. And then let's insert here font awesome icon with the classes FAS, FA, search. Alright, that's it about the HTML markup. Now it's time to customize those elements and start to write some CSS. First of all, I'm going to create some default and reset styles. I'm going to select every element using an asterisk. First of all, I'm going to get rid of default margin and padding. Let's set both properties to 0. Then I'm going to set box sizing to border box. Throughout this project, I'm going to use rem as the measurement unit. Right now, 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels because by default, the font size of the HTML element is equal to 16 pixels. I want to convert 1 rem into 10 pixels, and for that, we have to decrease the font size of the HTML element and set it to 62.5%. Now, as you can see, all the elements became smaller. Alright, first of all, I'm going to customize the project like so. I mean, I will style and place the elements here at the top of the page, and then we will take care of the animations. So let's go ahead and select wrapper div elements and define its width and height. I'm going to set width to 100%. Then the height is going to be 5 rem, and also change the background color. I'm going to use here RGBA value to 55, 69, 69 and 0.5. Next, I'm going to place the elements in the center of the wrapper, and for that let's use Flexbox. We need display flags. Then for the horizontal centering, I'm going to use justify content center. As for the vertical centering, we need align items center. Alright, so the elements are placed in the center perfectly. Let's move on and start to customize the search input. At first, I'm going to select its wrapper and define width. Let's make it 30 rem. After that, I'm going to select the input element itself. First of all, let's define its width, make it 27 rem. And also, I'm going to make the background color transparent. Next, I'm going to get rid of the default border and leave it at the bottom only. So we need border none. And then border bottom with values 0.1 rem, solid. And as the color, I'm going to use 999. Alright. After that, let's take care of the font size. I'm going to set it to 1.5 rem and also create some space between the letters. Let's set it to 0.15 rem. Also, I'm going to get rid of default outline. Let's set it to none. Then change the color. Use here 555. And finally, I'm going to create some space on the right side. Let's set margin right to 1 rem. Okay, so that's it regarding the input field. Let's go ahead and start the X button. Let's select it. First of all, I'm going to set font size to 1.5 rem. Then I'm going to change the color. Let's make it 999 and make the cursor pointer. Alright, before we move on and customize the search icon, I want to align both elements vertically in the center, and for that let's use Flexbox. We need display flex and then align items center. Okay, let's move on and customize the search icon. Let's select its wrapper, developments. At first, I'm going to define the font size. Let's make it 1.5 rem. And then I'm going to set position to absolute. So we're going to place the search icon in front of the input field. I'm going to define the top position as 1.7 rem. As for the right position, I'm going to make a little calculation. As you know, the width of the search input is 30 rem. So in order to place the search icon in front of the search input, we need to add half of the width of the search input to 50%. So I'm going to use one of the functions called calc, and then we need 50% plus 15 rem. So now, as you can see, the icon is placed in front of the search input, but I think we need some space between them. So instead of 15 rem, let's use 16 rem. Alright, finally, let's change the color of the icon. Let's select eye elements, set its color to 999, and also change the cursor, make it pointer. Alright, so everything is ready to create the animations. As you saw, by default, we have to hide the input field and the X button, and also we have to move the search icon to the top right corner of the page. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hide the search input wrapper. For that, let's use opacity with value 0 and also visibility hidden. Then change the right position of the search icon. Let's set right property to 3 rem. Okay, now it's time to create animation. Let's take a look at the finished project. So once I click the icon, it will start to move and also increase the size. We will have a couple of different steps during the animation. Let's go ahead and create CSS keyframes. I'm going to call it search icon anim. So from 0% to 40%, the element will change its top position and also the font size. So at 0%, we will have top position 1.7 RAM. As for the 40%, we will have top position with the value 40% and also the font size with the value 25 RAM. Then from 40% to 60%, the element will keep its top position, but we will change the right position. So at 60%, we will have again top with 40%. As for the right position, we will have the calculation 50% plus 16 RAM. Finally, from 60% to 100%, the element will change its top position, but we will keep the right position. So at 100%, we will have top property with value 1.7 RAM and the right position with the previous value. Okay, so the CSS keyframes are ready. Now we have to apply this animation to the element. For that, I'm going to use the animation property. We have to specify here the name of the keyframes and then the duration of the animation. It's going to be 1 second. So as you can see, the icon is moving and the animation works fine. We have here a tiny issue. Once the animation ends, then the icon goes back to its default position. We don't need that. We have to maintain the position that we have at the 100%. So in order to do that, we have to use one of the values called forwards. Okay, so now as you can see, everything works fine. Actually, we need to run this animation once we click the icon. So now it's time to start to write some JavaScript. We need to attach a click event listener to the search icon. So first of all, I'm going to select this icon. Let's create a new variable and call it search icon. I'm going to select this element using query selector method. Let's specify here class name search icon followed by the tag name I. Okay, after that I'm going to add an event listener to the search icon. We have to specify here the click event, and also we have to pass here a callback function which will be executed once we click the search icon. So as you know, we have to apply animation property to the search icon. In order to do that, I'm going to add a new class to the search icon, I mean to the parent element. Then we will select that element using newly created class in CSS, and we will apply animation property to the element. So we need here search icon, then we have to get access to its parent element. So I'm going to use here property called parent element. Next we need another property called class list. It includes all the classes that the element has. And then I'm going to use method called add. We need to specify here the class, let's say change. Alright, that's it regarding JavaScript right now. Let's go back to the CSS file. So as I said, now we need to select search icon with the class change. And then we need to move this line of code here. So now if I click the search icon, then the animation will run. Okay, next we have to display the search input wrapper. Right now it is hidden. So in the same way, I'm going to use class change. First of all, let's select a wrapper, create new variable and call it search input wrapper. I'm going to select this element using again query selector method. Let's specify here the class name search input wrapper. Then let's add class change to these elements. So we need search input wrapper dot class list dot add with the class change. Then go back to the CSS file and select wrapper with the class change. So in order to display the search input wrapper, we need opacity 1 and visibility visible. So now if I click the search icon, then the search input will appear. Right now it appears without any effect, so we need to use transition with the values all. Then the duration is going to be 0.5 seconds. And besides that, I'm going to use here little delay time, 1 second. Okay, so now as you can see, we have here much nicer and cool effect. Before we move on and start to program the X closing button, I want to add one more thing here. Once the search input is displayed, I want it to be focused automatically. For that, I'm going to use one of the methods called focus, but in this case, we need to wait 1 second in order to appear the elements. So at first, let's select the input element, create new variable, and call it search input. I'm going to select element again with query selector method. Let's specify here the class name search input, followed by the tag name input. So I'm going to use a method called set timeout. It takes 2 parameters. The first one is a callback function. Let's insert here search input dot focus. As for the second argument, it's going to be the amount of time. In this case, as we said, we need 1 second, so I'm going to pass here 1000 milliseconds. So now if we display the search input, then it will be focused automatically. Okay, now we have to move on and make the X button work. Once we click it, we have to hide the search input wrapper, and also we have to move the search icon back to its default position. First of all, let's select X button. I'm going to create new variable. Let's call it close icon. And then select the element using query selector method. I'm going to specify here the class name search inputs, followed by the tag name I. After that, we have to attach click event listener to the icon. Let's specify here the event type click, and also we need a callback function. So once we click the button, we have to remove class change from the search input wrapper and the search icon as well. So I'm going to grab those 2 lines, paste them here, and then change add into remove. So now if I click the X button, then the elements will hide, and also the search icon will go back to its initial place. Actually, everything works fine, but we need to add some effects here. At first, I'm going to hide elements with some transition. So let's use transition with search input wrapper. Let's assign to it values all and 0.5 second. So now, as you can see, the elements are hiding smoothly. Next, I'm going to take care of the search icon. We're going to create a separate animation in which we will define the movement of the icon to the right side. So let's create new CSS keyframes. I'm going to call them search icon anim2. So we will have 2 different steps, 0% and 100%. At 0%, we need to define right position, and we have to insert here the calculation 50% plus 16 RAM. As for the 100%, we need to define right position as 3 RAM. Finally, let's apply this animation to the search icon. Use animation property with the value search icon anim2, then 0.5 second, and also we need forwards. Alright, so as you can see, everything works perfectly, and actually with this project we are done. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned some new stuff. Let's move on and take care of the next project. Alright, so it's time to move on and start to build our next project. In this video we're going to create a clock with HTML, CSS and JavaScript. It's going to be a standard clock which you probably have at home on the wall. We have here numbers for hours and also 3 different arrows which indicate the hours, minutes and seconds. Alright, let's go ahead and start to create a project. I have a new folder on the desktop called clock, which right now is empty. Let's open it in VS Code and create our working files for HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I'm going to call them index.html, style.css and script.js. Then open the index.html file and create a basic HTML document. For that we need to place here an exclamation mark and then hit Tab or Enter. So here we have the basic HTML tags. The first thing that I'm going to do is to change the title. Let's insert here clock, and then I'm going to link CSS and JavaScript files. Let's open link tag in the head element and specify here the path of the CSS file. As for the JavaScript, I'm going to open script tag right above the closing body tag, and then we need to specify the path of the file in the source attribute. Okay, so we are ready to start. The last thing that I'm going to do is to run the project to the browser. For that I'm going to use one of the VS Code packages called a live server. It allows us to run the project live in the browser and make changes and updates without refreshing the page each time. Okay, finally let's place browser and the editor side by side like so and get started. I'm going to create the HTML markup, then we will style it, we will make the elements look like the clock, and then we will make it work using JavaScript. So let's go ahead and start to create the HTML markup. Let's open the div tag, which is going to be the container. It will include the entire content. Then I'm going to open another div tag inside of the container. Let's assign it class clock. So the clock will consist of 2 different parts. We will have the numbers and the arrows. Let's open div tag with the class numbers. We will have 4 different numbers. Let's open div tag with the class 12. And as the content, let's insert here 12. Then I'm going to duplicate this line of code 3 times and then change the class names and also the content. We need 3, then 6 and 9. Okay, and that's it about the numbers. Let's open div tag, which is going to be the wrapper of the arrows. We will have 3 different arrows. Let's open div tag with the class hour. Then I'm going to duplicate it twice and change the class names. We need here minute and second. Alright, that's it regarding the HTML markup. Right now we have here just the numbers. So let's go ahead and start to customize the clock. First of all, I'm going to bring in the link for the Google fonts. I'm going to use one of the Google fonts throughout this project. So let's go ahead and visit the Google Fonts website. Then search for one of the fonts called Concert 1. So right now we have here a text as the example, but we are interested in numbers. So we can simply change the sentence into numerals and see how the font looks like. Let's select the style. In order to link the fonts, we have 2 different options. You can either grab this link and paste it in the head element, or you can click import, grab this URL and paste it in the CSS file. Alright, so once the font is selected, next I'm going to reset some default styles. Let's select all the elements using an asterisk and get rid of default margin and padding. I'm going to set both of them to 0 and also change the font family for every element. Let's use here our Google font Concert 1 cursive. Alright, so as you can see, now the numbers look in a kind of different way. Throughout this project, I'm going to use RAM as the measurement unit. Right now, 1 RAM equals 16 pixels because the font size of the HTML element is equal to 16 pixels. I want to convert 1 RAM into 10 pixels. Therefore, we have to decrease the font size of the HTML element and make it 62.5%. So, as you can see, the numbers became smaller. Next, I'm going to take care of the container. Let's select it. And first of all, let's define its width and height. I'm going to set width to 100%. As for the height, I'm going to make it 100% of the viewport. So we need 100 VH. Next, I'm going to place the content of the container in the center. And for that, let's use Flexbox. We need to set display to flex. And then for horizontal and vertical centering, we need justify content center and also align items center. Alright, so now the content is placed in the center and we can customize the clock itself. Let's go ahead and select clock and define its width and height. I'm going to set both of them to 35 RAM. Also change the background color. I'm going to make it gray using color AC. Next, I'm going to make the clock rounded. For that, we have to use border radius with value 50%. Then let's create a little border. Let's set its width to 0.5 RAM. Then make it solid. As for the color, let's use 777. And lastly, let's create a little shadow effect on all 4 sides. Use box shadow with the values 0.5 RAM twice, then 1 RAM, and as the color, let's use 555, and then I'm going to place here minus 0.5 RAM twice, 1 RAM, and the same color. Alright, that's it regarding the clock. Next, I'm going to take care of the numbers. Let's select the wrapper div element and define width and height. In this case, we need to inherit the same width and height from the parent element, which is a clock. So we need to set width and height, both of them to inherit. Alright, after that, I'm going to select all div elements inside of the numbers. So at first, we're going to position the numbers. Let's set the position to absolute. Then, in order to position the numbers according to the parent element, we need to set the position of the numbers to a relative. And after that, let's increase the font size of the numbers, make it 2.5 RAM. Alright, so now I'm going to position each number separately. Let's go ahead and start with the 12. It's going to be placed at the top of the clock. So let's select it and set its position to 1 RAM. Then we need to center it horizontally. For that, I'm going to set left position to 50%. And then for perfect centering, we have to use transform with the translate x function. And we have to translate the element by minus 50%. Alright. Next we have 3. Let's select it. In case of 3, we need right position to be 1 RAM. And then we have to center element vertically. So we need to set top position to 50%. And in this case, we need transform, translate y minus 50%. Let's go ahead and take care of the rest of the numbers. The next one is 6. In this case, we need bottom position to be 1 RAM. And then let's grab those 2 lines from here. As for the last number, which is 9, we need left position to be 1 RAM. And then we need those 2 lines here as well. Alright, so all 4 numbers are positioned. Next, I'm going to change the color. Let's make it white. And also create a little shadow effect. Use text shadow with the values 0.2 rem 3 times, and the color 222. Okay, that's it regarding numbers. Let's move on and take care of the arrows. First of all, let's define this width and height. Like numbers, I'm going to inherit width and height from the clock. Let's set both of them to inherit. Next, I'm going to define the position. Let's make it absolute. In this case, the element will jump out of the normal flow of the page. And in order to position it according to the parent element, we need position relative for the clock. Next, let's define the top and left properties. I'm going to set both of them to 0. The arrows should be placed in the center of the clock. And in order to achieve that, I'm going to use again Flagsbox. We need display flags. And then justify content center and align items center. Alright, that's it about the wrapper. Next, I'm going to create this little circle. It's going to be created using the before pseudo element. So let's select arrows followed by the before pseudo element. Let's make the content empty. Then define width and height, and also the background color. I'm going to set width and height to 2.5 rem. As for the background color, it's going to be white. So here we have the elements. Right now it has the shape of the square, so let's make it circle. And also let's make a little shadow effect. Let's set border radius to 50%. As for the shadow, let's use box shadow with the values 0.2 rem twice, then 0.5 rem, and as the color, let's use 777. Alright, that's it about the circle. Let's go ahead and take care of the arrows. Right now they are not visible because we have just the empty div elements. Let's go ahead and select all div elements inside of the arrows. First of all, let's define width and height and also the background color. I'm going to set width to 0.7 rem. Then the height is going to be 12 rem. As for the background color, I'm going to use color FFF05. So now the elements are visible. Next, I'm going to take care of their positions. I'm going to place them in the center of this circle. So let's set position to absolute and then define bottom position, make it 50%. Okay, after that I'm going to add a little shadow effect to the arrows. Let's use box shadow with the values 0.2 rem twice, then 0.5 rem, and the color 777. Okay, lastly, let's change the shape of the elements in order to make them look like the arrows. I'm going to do that using border radius. So the border radius takes 4 different values. The top left and top right corners will be 100%. As for the bottom right and bottom left corners, I'm going to make them zeros. So as you can see, now the elements look like the arrows. Right now we see here just one arrow, but all 3 arrows are displayed. They are placed on top of each other. The next thing that I'm going to do is to place the arrows behind this circle, and for that we can use the z-index property with some higher value than 0, let's say 10. Alright, after that I'm going to customize the arrows separately. Let's start with the seconds because it is placed on top of the rest of the arrows. I'm going to change the background color. Let's set it to 24CFE6. So right now nothing is changed, and it happens because we have already changed the background color of the arrows when we selected them using the div tag, and it has a higher precedence. In order to override this style, we need to select the element using the parent element, I mean arrows. So now the background color is changed. Besides that, I'm going to rotate the arrow. Let's use transform with the rotate function. and I'm going to rotate the arrow by, let's say, 270 degrees. Right now the arrow is rotated from the center because by default the origin of the transformation is set to center. In this case we need to make the origin of the transformation bottom center. So now, as you can see, the problem is fixed. Next, let's take care of the hour. Like the second, we need to select it using the parent element because we're going to decrease its height. Let's set its height to 10 rem, and also I'm going to rotate the arrow. Let's rotate it by 90 degrees. Alright, so finally the clock is customized and everything is ready to make it work. As we said, we're going to do that using JavaScript, so let's go ahead and open the script.js file. The first thing that I'm going to do is to select all three arrows. So let's go ahead and create a new variable. I'm going to call it hour. Then select the arrow using query selector method. Let's specify here the class name hour. Then I'm going to duplicate this line of code twice. Let's change the name of the variable. We need minute, and also we need here class minute. And then we need here second, and as the class name, let's insert here second as well. Alright, after that I'm going to create a function. Let's call it set date. So inside that function we will manage to work the arrows properly, and then we will call this function after every second using the set interval method. First of all, I'm going to create a variable which will give us the current date. I'm going to call it now. It should be equal to new date. Let's see in the console what this variable gives us. I'm going to run console.log now. And next I'm going to call this function, but with the set interval method. Actually, this method allows us to execute the function with some intervals. It takes two arguments. The first one is the name of the function. In our case, it's set date. As for the second argument, it's the amount of the interval expressed in milliseconds. In our case, it's going to be 1000 milliseconds. Okay, let's inspect the page and switch to the console tab. So, as you can see, we are getting here the current date and time, and also the time zone after each second. Alright, next we need to define the seconds, minutes and hours separately. So let's create a new variable. I'm going to call it getSecond. In order to get the seconds from the current time, we have to use one of the built-in date methods called getSeconds. So we need now.getSeconds. If we check this variable in the console, then we will get seconds. In the same way, we have to define minutes and hours. So let's duplicate this line of code twice and then change the names of the variables and also the names of the methods. We need get minutes and get hours. Alright, so all three variables are created. As you can see, our clock has the shape of the circle and the size of the circle is equal to 360 degrees. We need to convert seconds, minutes and hours into degrees in order to define the portions of the movement of each arrow. Let's go ahead and start with the seconds. I'm going to create a new variable. Let's call it, let's say, second degree. So in order to convert seconds into degrees, we need to use the following formula. We need to divide the current amount of seconds by 60 because we have 60 seconds, and then we have to multiply it by 360. Alright, so now we already can make the second arrow move. For that we have to rotate it by the second degree. So we need second dot style dot transform equal to rotate function, and as the value we have to pass here second degree followed by the degrees. So as you can see, now the arrow is moving after each second and it shows us the current seconds. In the same way we have to convert minutes and hours. Let's duplicate this line of code twice. So we need here minute degree, then get minute. Next we need hour degree and get hour. In this case we have to divide it by 12 because overall we have 12 hours. Alright, finally we need to define the values of the rotate function for the minutes and the hours. Let's duplicate this line of code twice. We need here minute.style, and also we have to pass here minute degree. As for the hour, we have to pass here hour degree. Alright, so as you can see, we have here a current time and the clock is working perfectly.